Thanks a lot, Mick, for having me and for agreeing to do this collab. I really, really appreciate it. I think what we want to do today is to build a bridge between the treasures working in Europe and US with
Yep.
the treasures working in Middle East and Africa. And this bridge would basically be something that would help people who are working in Europe and Africa or Europe and US and overseeing Middle East and Africa or want to move to Middle East and Africa and vice versa. If you are a treasurer who's based in Middle East and Africa and looking after Europe, US, what should you be looking for? And if you want to move to the Europe and US, what do you expect? What challenges you're facing? What sort of skills you need to have, and vice versa. So, how do you want to start? Should we go first on Europe and US and maybe discuss how the market looks like and what type of skills and requirements you need to have as a treasurer just to oversee this market and to be able to navigate the challenges that you face in this market?
Yeah, I mean, let's just talk it through now. And the key thing I would say is you talk about a bridge, and that's quite an interesting example. In order to go over a lot of bridges, wherever it might be, you need a ticket. You need your ticket, you need, in this case, a visa. And you and I talked about this is one of the original reasons we decided to do the show together. People ask me, can I move from the USA to UK? No, you can't. Unless you go with your company, unless your company moves you and they sponsor you, then even then you need to have a high skill set. You need to have in-demand skills, if you like. I get US guys say, "Oh, I want to come to the UK. I want to work in the UK. I want to work in Europe." I'm like, "Good luck with that." And they're like, "Oh, can you help me?" No, I can't. Oh, hang on. But because they sometimes say, "But hang on, you're based in the UK." I said, "Yeah, but I'm a global recruiter. I recruit a lot of US people into US jobs. I don't move UK people across. I don't move UK European people across to the US." And we'll come back to Middle East and Africa in a minute. But the fact is, there is the Atlantic barrier, if you like. Unless you want to go over there. If I wanted to go over there as a business owner, I'd have to lodge a bond. Even though we've traded there for 15 years, I can't get over there. I can go and visit, but I can't stay. There is, requirements and things. So people have said, well, how do I do it? I said, well, if you're working for a large multinational in, say, the UK or Europe, and they have an opportunity over there, you can go. And I've seen people do it effectively. And if you spend a number of years there, you can qualify for a green card. It sometimes also changes, if you like, depending on the administration. So I had a lady in the past, she was working for one company, she was about to get a green card. It was literally days away. There was a different government. It all changed, and they said, right, you were here for 3.5, 4 years. Now you need to be here 5 years. And she was ready. She had her resume ready because she wanted to move companies. She had to stick there for another year. It was fine. Otherwise, she was over there. She was sponsored. She was an Irish citizen. She was there in the US. She couldn't get sponsored. Couldn't get the green card. Literally the day after she got the green card. So she stayed another year. Resume was on the desk. 2 weeks later, she was in a different company. She was then a US citizen. She could move around and everything else. So you get those requirements. Similar the other way around. So coming from the US to the UK, again, work for a big multinational, and they can sponsor you. And as long as you've got high demand skills, and they can move you across. And then at a later stage, or you maybe can be married to a local citizen. A number of US people, they may have heritage where their grandparents came from maybe Ireland, from the UK, or across Europe. I see a lot of the time with they'll have Italian citizenship a lot of the time, and they come over and they say, yeah, I've got it from my grandparents, and you can apply that way. But you have to talk to lawyers. We're not giving any legal advice on this show. We're just doing it that's what they say, sort of thing. That covers that little bit, if you like, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you think do you think it differs if you're looking for a junior position versus if you're looking for a senior position? So I think when you say that you moving with your company makes more sense, this is definitely if you're more senior position. For example, if you're currently working in Middle East and Africa, regardless what country you're based in, let's say,
Yep.
example, Egypt,
Yes.
or UAE, and you have your family, you're already in a pretty senior position, you cannot risk moving with your family. You're 30 something or 40 something years old and moving with your family and taking the risks in hopes to find a job in Europe and US. So it's the safest thing is to go with your company. But what if you just graduated, you just have your bachelor's degree?
Yeah.
I think maybe then you don't have a family, you don't have much responsibility. Maybe then you can have the risk of going and trying to explore for a year or two, try to find something that fits your.
You could
You
try,
think there is a difference there?
but
Yeah.
you know you can visit, but you can't stay
Mm.
because the point
Yeah,
is
of course.
also if you like, say you're from Egypt and you wanted to go to the UK and work, you need a work visa. You can't give one, and they're not going to give it out anytime soon, certainly under this government administration and everything else. In addition to that, you are, say you're wanting to come across, let's do Egypt or Turkey. Again, I said, said before the program, I had someone just last night saying, I'm in Turkey, I want to move across. They can't. It's not a negative on them. They've got some good treasury experience, but they will be in competition with, he's a sort of senior treasury manager or his treasury manager. How many treasury managers do you think we've got in the UK? If I put a job out now,
Thousands.
if I put a job out in London and it says, right, treasury manager wanted, and, decent role, all-round role, say mid-level salary, say 75, 80 or something like that, within a couple of days, even if I'm not going out to my database, I'm putting it on LinkedIn. If I'm going out to people, I'll probably have 80 to 100 people apply. Are all of those right? Probably because LinkedIn, no, because a lot of the people on LinkedIn are looking for jobs actively. They're not always the best candidates. They're terrible. They're just not the best. That's why we have our linkages. We go to people that are not applying for jobs on LinkedIn, but they are on our database and looking for the next career step. That's a massive slice. And also the junior guys at Treasury Analyst, we have even more. People have got into Treasury and there are loads of them. How many treasury analysts are coming to our event? We're talking about 20, 30 treasury analysts coming to an event of 120. So that's where most of the people, and then as it goes further up, you get that pyramid, if you like, and you get 100 top 100 treasurers in the UK. That's what it's like. So, that's
100%.
Yeah.
And I can relate. I can maybe say an example from my
Yeah,
personal
please.
experience. I was working in Ricket, and Ricket is a huge UK listed company. I was working as a senior credit and treasury analyst in Egypt. I was looking after the North Africa region. And then this is at this stage of my career, this is where I really fell in love with in treasury. So I thought, and I gave up on all my dreams to be a financial analyst or commercial analyst. I just fell in love with in treasury back then, and I thought, okay, this is what I want to do. So the first thing I did is I reached out to our group treasurer who's based in UK.
Yeah.
And I told him I really want to continue in treasury. Let me know if there is an opportunity for treasury. And he said, actually, there is one opportunity for senior treasury analysts in the UK. Let me check back and get back to you. And he checked and he got back to me and he said, even though we're in the same company, he said, unfortunately, for this level, they need someone who's based in UK, and they prefer someone who's based in UK because, as you rightly said, I would assume the pool of candidates in the UK, especially for this mid-level range, not very senior, still a senior analyst, not a junior. There is a lot of people there in the UK who can fit the profile that they can. There is no need for relocation costs, even if it's within the company. It's still going to be a bit tricky. Maybe if you're more senior level and your set of skills is really needed because you understand the business, you've been with the company for like 10 years, 15 years, you understand the company very well versus if they hire someone within the UK but doesn't really know the company. So maybe this would give you an edge to move within the company from your country to the UK or the US. So I think, I think it makes sense and it's very relatable. Okay, let's move to the skills, the difference between the skills and requirements and the knowledge that you need when you are looking after or working in the Middle East and Africa versus when you're looking after or working in Europe and US. I can start, we can go one by one. I think the most important one is the sense of the FX exposure in Middle East and Africa versus Europe and US. When you go to Europe and US, the currencies are pretty stable. Speaking in Euro, GBP, US. And Africa, you need to understand how volatile the FX market is and
Yeah.
how it's impacting to your capital and
Yeah.
to your business. I'm going to say a little story. It's not really related to the treasury, but just to show you how there is a disconnect between your understanding of the FX markets that's happening in Africa and Middle East when you have lived all your life in US and Europe. I was in an event a couple years ago with a very senior guy in Coinbase. Coinbase is the crypto company, US listed company. And it's an informal chat. We were just chatting, having dinner together. And I was discussing with him the importance about Bitcoin. I know it's not our discussion on the
That
podcast,
was great.
but
Yeah.
I was discussing with him about the importance about Bitcoin for African markets, and he wasn't getting the point. What I was trying to explain, because he lived most of his life, if not all, in the US, maybe
Yeah.
some in Europe. So he hasn't seen the devaluation of capital, your wealth, because of the devaluation of the currency of the country you are living in. Yes, we have seen that recently after COVID
Yeah.
in the US and Europe, but this was not the case. This is yearly situation in Africa and Middle East. Maybe not much in GCC because most of the currencies are pegged to the US dollars, but especially in Africa. Let's say, for example, this is an example that I always like to refer to in Zimbabwe or in Egypt or in Nigeria. Um, in Nigeria, the currency in 1 year fell 55%,
Yes.
right? I think that's in 2023 or 2022. In Egypt, 50% in 2023. In Zimbabwe, it's more than 100%, almost 200%. So whatever amount of wealth you have or capital, if you're a company, it's just dropped 50% or 100%, right? So this is sort of risk and sort of knowledge that you need to have, a sense that you need to have. If you haven't been exposed to Africa before, if you have lived all of your life in Europe and the US, you haven't seen that grave devaluation or depreciation in your capital. It's very hard to feel it when you move to Africa. You need to keep that in mind.
And it
Yeah,
also applies across some of the Latin American countries as well, and
of
they've
course.
seen exactly the same. But as you say, and we talked about this on our previous call, if you like, what you also a lot of the time you'll have the central treasury where they'll take the strategic decisions. That's fine, that's where you need a strategic model and how you're going to grow things. But then you need the operational knowledge. You need an Africa treasury manager. You need someone in Brazil. You need someone that has local knowledge, has local relationships, that if something does devalue by 50% overnight, right, what do we do? How do we plan for this? How do we make it work? And then working around, as you say, you need that local, those local relationships. Treasury is a relationships game as well. That's one of the key things as well. So, yeah, I think that's a really good point.
100%. And then I think this takes us to, so if you have the knowledge about the FX and how the FX works in Africa, then you will be able to equip the right tools like derivatives, FX
Yeah.
forwards, NDF swaps, whatever. So definitely you need to have the knowledge in
Yeah.
that if you want to oversee MEA region or move to MEA region.
Yeah.
The other thing is after FX is the interest rate knowledge. So yeah, if you're in Europe or US and interest rates go up, what you would try to do is try to avoid taking debt.
Yeah.
Right? Because now the debt costs way much.
Yeah.
In Africa, not necessarily. Going back to our example in Nigeria, in 2023, the currency devaluated 55% or 50 something percent, right? Back then, the interest rate was around 18 to 20%. So if you had borrowed at 18 or 20%, converted your money to US dollars and get the money out of Nigeria, you have basically saved 30% of loss in your capital.
Yeah.
Versus just leaving your money there.
Yeah. Well, also, I had a client I was working with at the time, and they actually paused a campaign at the time because they said, look, it's devalued, like virtually overnight. This is what it's done. I said, oh, crumbs, are you okay? And they said, well, actually, we're all right. I was like, why? They said, well, yes, it's gone down by 50%, but so have our costs. Everything else has dropped by 50%. So actually, yes, our profits are dropping 50, but our costs are dropping 50. We've just got to see how this plays out. We've got to work this out, and we've got to manage that situation. And they came back out of it and everything else, and it improved and everything. But they were like, yeah, we're not going to do anything but they wanted stability sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I was going to say we've touched on Africa, but should we move across the Middle East and stuff? Because, we were wanting to talk about that as well.
Yeah, 100%. So I think another thing that you need to, so when it comes to FX and interest rates, if you're looking at the GCC countries, you won't see much risks there because basically, like I said, most of the currencies are pegged to the US dollars, and the fluctuations in the interest rate is more or less also affected by the Fed rate as well. So if you're looking just after GCC, I'm not sure how different it will be from if you're looking after Europe. I would imagine maybe you can comment on that. Europe is more regulated. I'm speaking more on that because I'm based in UAE. UAE, there's a lot of regulations, but it's very, very flexible. It's very easy to initiate your company, and there's lots of regulations around, very positive regulations that really helps business in terms, even if you want to have a crypto company or whatever type of company that you have, they are very encouraging to the investments. I don't know how different it is from the regulations in Europe. I would imagine what I know is Europe maybe is a bit more strict in that sense. So
I think
maybe
it's no, I wouldn't say strict is the right word. Maybe I would say it is regulated, but there is clarity over the rules. It's the fact is there are clear rules in each of the regions. These are our rules. This is the transfer pricing rules. These are the tax rules. These are treasury rules. Interchange. Everything is developed. Obviously, it's still evolving a lot more in across Middle East as well. There's a lot. It's developing rapidly as well. I think it also comes down to not just the rules on the cash and everything else. I think there's another element here. It's actually the development of Treasury, as you and I have talked about. What I saw, I've been a Treasury recruiter now 25 years. At one stage, there were, lots of startup companies, or, essentially they were starting up treasuries 20 odd years ago, and they would bring across treasurers from the UK or Europe a lot of the time to come in and help them structure their treasuries, to work out how they were going to be structured, give them a roadmap, do the structuring. And what there were a lot of treasurers that would go over, and some would say, right, I am staying here forever, and they wanted to actually be there for a number of years. There were a number of times that they would also go there and they would bounce back, because what they would do is they would be asked to come in, and sometimes I thought they were slightly short-sighted, some of them, because they would go in and they would be training their local teams, and they would recruit a team, and then after 2, 3, 4 years, they would have, they'd have had their local visa, and then it got to 4 years, and they would say, right, thank you very much for your work. We've paid you very well for your time. You can go home now. You can go back to the UK or Europe. And they'll be like, oh, well, I don't want to. Well, no, hang on. You've helped us do this. You've helped us get to this stage. Thank you very much. You can go back now, sort of thing. And it was like, oh, well, because actually they'd done their job. That was their job at the time, to train and get a team. And there are some really great, treasury professionals like yourself. And you and I have talked about Roshan, who we know, and Rob, and some of the guys that we know locally in the region, now. And there are very much more established associations. There are much more established treasury frameworks around there. And I think, a lot of this is coming up. And there's, I've got a friend actually who's moved over there, who's actually moved across to Dubai, and he's doing a lot of the building work. He's actually one of the project managers there, and he was talking about how he was there 15 years ago when their kids were growing up and what it was like. And he said now the infrastructure is really ramped up. And he said, in the UK and some of the UK projects and UK and Europe, it's improved. He said, actually, it's 100 times quicker. And he was like, wow, so I think that's the thing, is that it's really evolved, and it's a good thing as well.
No, it's really encouraging. I think maybe the next thing is maybe we can touch upon is the payments between countries in the Middle East and Africa. So obviously, if you're within the GCC, it's easy for payments flow. You have some ease when it comes to cash pooling, especially in UAE. If your headquarters is in UAE, You can do cash pooling in dirhams if you're looking after GCC
Yeah.
countries. So you can sweep Saudi riyal, you can sweep Qatari riyal into your account in UAE and dirhams, which is really a neat thing. If you're operating in Africa, there is a very popular platform now, which is called Pan Africa, which is easing the payments through multiple African countries as well. So these are things that you need to be aware of. Some of the solutions that might help you. So this is when it comes to the payment structure within the Middle East and Africa. And then maybe we can move to the challenges that you face when you're implementing a treasury management system or doing an integration with the banks. In the GCC, I would say you won't see much challenges, and a lot of the TMS companies are well established here in the GCC. You will find most of them here in UAE, like the big ones like Kariba, all the big TMS companies. You won't find much challenges when you integrate with any of the banks here, but you will find in some African banks. Yeah. Maybe they're not sending the right MT940. Maybe you're not able to do the payments through your TMS. So there you might need to find a workaround. So some companies, they provide the solution where they would collect the statements from your bank, they transform it to the appropriate form that would feed your TMS. So there is a work around it, but it's not, I would assume it's not as in not all the countries, but in some of the African countries and North African countries, it's not as smooth as it can be in Europe or in GCC. So this is something also that...
I think also one of the other things not to forget is about security. And how secure your connections are and stuff. I remember, and I was just looking up actually, a great guy in the US, but he's a global treasurer, Sasan Parenda. He was a podcast guest of mine a few years ago now. I loved having him on. He's the global treasurer of a Child Fund International. So a lot of the work they do is in Africa. And they have the local workers and they have local clients and everything else. And what they were finding is that people were, in order to get Wi-Fi, in order to get things, they were driving into car parks to go on the back of a hotel Wi-Fi network. And they were like, crumbs, this is not secure. We are worried about this. What are we going to do? And actually, I think they won an award for this. What they actually did was they gave everyone a phone. What they did was they gave them a secure phone. There's security on the phones, and they would then tether their phones to their laptops. You had a secure connection. It meant it was all controlled, got rid of all the problems, literally overnight. They were like, right, here's a phone, have a phone. But the cost of that was a fraction of what they were, with the fraud and the other things and the security. And I remember they got one of the AFP Pinnacle Awards, and rightly so, because it was just one of the ways that they really looked at doing it. Yeah, so maybe, we'll have a link to that as well, because, great guy as well. Sasan, so a big shout out to him. But that's one of the things. I think that's one of the things that different. And it's there's different. Security is obviously a global issue, but I think that's where it's still a greater challenge.
I think the last point on the things that you need to be aware of if you want to operate in Middle East and Africa, especially now with the trade. I don't want to call them trade wars, but trade challenges that we are facing now with the tariffs and everything. You need to be aware about the trade agreements that we have in the region. So if any trade agreements between the GCC countries, between the African countries, so there's very popular one called the COMESA, for example, which basically would help you in a sense. If you're a trading company, you would know, okay, from where should I buy this stuff? For example, if you are operating in Kenya, if you want to buy raw materials, if these raw materials are in Egypt available, then it makes more sense for you to buy from Egypt than to buy from Europe, because you will benefit from the trade agreements, etc. So I think this would be the last point I wanted to mention when it comes to what you need to be aware about in the market.
Okay, that's on a company level. What I wanted to do, and you and I talked about this before, let's bring it down to an individual level.
Yeah.
If you're an individual who's wanting to work in the Middle East, you can. That is great. You can go across. You can go and work in. I've got a couple of UK guys who have recently gone across to Qatar, and they're working there. And shout out to them. But don't expect it to be anytime soon. The fact is,
it's not easy.
Yeah, it is not as
It's
easy as
not
just
easy. It's not
walking.
easy.
Hey, I've got my passport. Give me a job. Thanks very much, guys. You can work there, but you will need sponsorship or you will need your visa, and that can take, a lot of the time in, for instance, countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia. They have their own processes where you will put forward your right to where you want this position, and they will review it this month, and they say no, we don't have enough time to review you this month. We'll see you next month. So it
I've
takes
been in
time.
UAE. I've been in Dubai for 5 years, so
Yeah,
I've witnessed the COVID period here in
yeah,
Dubai. I spent the COVID year here in Dubai. I was actually locked in my apartment with my wife and kids. And if you remember back then during COVID, in most of the countries in Europe and US, people were chasing around goods in the groceries. Where you go to the groceries, you will find shelves are empty. It
yeah,
was totally the opposite here in Dubai. When you go
yeah,
to Dubai, you found everything available. And the reason is because during COVID, a lot of companies let people go.
yeah,
And people, because they don't have permanent residency back then during COVID, they left the country,
yeah,
right? So after COVID, what UAE tries to do, and it's very successful at the
yeah,
moment, they try to encourage long-term residencies, like the
yeah.
5 year and the 10-year golden visas, and they also started to do. I'm not sure it's still available or not, but they started providing residencies for someone. If you want to come and look for a job, they will give you a visa for 3 to 6 months,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if it's still valid, if still applicable or not, but I know they had
Again,
this
again,
at
we're
some
not giving
point.
legal advice. We're not giving visa advice. Go and look on the web. That's it. It's a little known thing to
Hundred
Google.
percent, hundred
Go
percent.
and
I
Google
know
it,
it was
guys.
there.
Yeah,
There,
yeah,
I know it was there. I'm not sure if it's still. So
yeah,
go Google it. So what I want to do, what I want to say from this point
yeah,
is there has been a lot of encouragement, especially after COVID, to try and bring and retain high talents into the UAE.
yeah,
Having said that, even if you're here in UAE, at this point, it's overly crowded. Traffic here is crazy, and there is a lot of good talent here in UAE already. A lot of them coming from UK, a lot of them coming from the Middle East, a lot of them coming from India or Pakistan. So it's already a huge pool of candidates here in
yeah.
UAE. So again, the same as you said in for the case of Europe and US. If you're moving with your company, that's the one that would make the most
That's
sense.
great. Yeah, you get the memo.
The other options that you can look at, if this sort of visa is still valid, if it's still available, look into it. But you need to take into consideration that it's going to cost you to stay here on your own, from your own bucket for 3 months or 6 months, which is very, very costly. Living in UAE for 1 month, I would say would cost you around, to live comfortably, I would say at least like 10,000 dirhams on your own, without a family, without
Yeah,
anything. And it's not going to be a luxurious stay, just for food and rent
basic
and
and everything else. So
basic.
yes, you can do it, but you have to invest in yourself and think that. But as
Yes.
you say, the competition. It's like the UK market, but it's like the international market. We do our salary survey across everything, and actually, by the time this comes out, I can say this now. Actually, this is a bit of an exclusive for you. Usually, we do our salary survey, and our salary survey, we used to ask a question. It's a survey about salaries. It's not about recruitment, but we do have a recruitment question in there. Are you open to new career opportunities? Yes or no? That was it. That was our question, if you like. And I kept that in there for quite a while. And that was good. And it used to get about 70% saying yes, 30% saying no, I'm all right at the moment, mate. Thanks very much. But what I discovered, I go to conferences and I say to the room, I say, right, who's here looking for a job? And 1 in 10 hands would go up. They'd be willing to do. I said, right, if I came to you with a really good role and it's going to make you the next career step, it's going to do this, who's going to answer my phone call? Like 90% of the hands go up, and I said, right, for the 10% of you that haven't put your hands up, I know I know you're looking, but you're sitting next to your boss, so you can't put your hand up. But don't worry, I've already got their CVs, so don't worry. And they were like, oh yeah, funny. But I've changed the question, and I'm actually just looking for the question. Here you go. So I changed the question from, are you considering your career opportunity? Would you be open to hearing about roles that align with your experience and salary level? And this applies across the Middle East, Africa, the world, actually. So we've got people that take part. We have 1,500 people. That has risen. And by the time this comes out, it's already, I would say, we're approaching 90%. 9 out of 10 Treasury professionals are seeking a new role. They're not applying to jobs on LinkedIn. They're not actively there. But will they answer my phone call? Will they look at my email? Yes, they do. And what that means is there is that's your challenge. When someone says to me as well, maybe they come from Turkey, oh, but why can't I get a visa? Why can't I? I'm like, because you're going to be standing in a waiting room with 9 other Treasury professionals based there in the UK, from the UK, with the right to work, with everything, the visa and everything else, and you standing there at the end of this line without a right to work, without this. For that company to want to employ you, they would have to go through all these different hoops. And it's not a negative thing about you, it's just the system. And that's the thing. And we're not saying it's like you're a bad person. You're a great Treasury professional. But the fact is also, I said the other bit is, which is not more disheartening, I said there's probably not 9, 10 of you in the waiting room. There's probably 59 of you. Well, there's 60. And you're the 60th in the queue. I said there's 59 other Treasury professionals in the UK applying for that job. And it was like, oh dear, okay. And I said, again, it's not a negative reflection on you. It's just the state of the market. We're waiting for people to move around. There's that domino effect, isn't there? So that's one of the things.
Yeah, but did you reach out to? Do you conclude why this high percentage of treasurers are looking for new opportunities?
Because they want them. They've got. There's been post COVID. This is the first time in a few years that people have got a decent pay rise. They've got their bonus, but they've been frustrated that the employment market hasn't turned over very much. No one was moving jobs in COVID. Then post-COVID, there was a big surge, lots of people moving around and everything else. Now we're 2-3 years, and average tenure in a role a lot of the time with Treasury professionals. In the UK and Europe, it's slightly different. Across, again, I would say actually UK and Europe, and right the way across Middle East, Africa, it's quite similar. That people tend to move in a job. An old phrase I used to say was a year to learn the job, a year to do the job, a year to get bored of the job. So every 2 to 3 years, people were either moving on or they were moving out. They can move upwards as well. So you might be a Treasury analyst for 2 or 3 years, and then you become a senior Treasury analyst or a Treasury manager. So you might be with a company 4, 5, 6 years, maybe 2 roles, and you want to progress and everything else. What I would say is the average tenure of people I've seen in the US is a much longer. So actually, when I'm talking to someone, how long have you been in your role? I talk to someone in the UK, 2.5, 3 years, mate. That's why I'm looking for a new role. Talk to someone in the US. I've been in my job 6 years, 8 years. What, the same job? No, it's progressed and it's gone. But I've been at this company 8 years. They've been there a lot longer. So actually, there's even more frustration. People need to move on, and that's it. As you said earlier, the different trade issues, the tariffs and things like that. That's really unsettled people, and people are wanting to move around. But treasurers, rightly so, are not risk averse. They're risk aware. Said that before as well. And why would you make a move in this market? It's got to be the perfect next move. So if you're not moving, then somebody else, the next person isn't moving. I joke at conferences. People say, "What do you do as a recruiter?" I said, "Well, it's like musical chairs. Without people taking away the chairs." I said, but if everyone could get up, move one bit, swap badges, and just say you will work there, and I'll send out everyone a bill. They're like, oh yeah, that's nice. But that's what they do. Is you will take the role of another treasurer, come in with fresh ideas. We have the podcast every week, Treasury Career Corner. When I talk to people about their treasury careers, everyone has the same tools. They all use them differently. So you get a treasurer moving from one company to another, and the new treasurer that comes in goes, right, how are we approaching blockchain? How are we approaching AI? How are we doing this? And they go, well, we didn't do that. The previous treasurer didn't do that. Okay, we are now. Guys, this is the new thing. So you come in with fresh ideas. And it can be the other way around. Treasurer might be, really pushing it, and then they come in and they say, right, actually, we need someone who's back to basics. Our cash management's all over the place. We need a new treasury system. We need to come in and get some solidity here. And both of those are the right thing to do for the company at that stage in the evolution. So that's the key thing, I think. So
100%. And I touched that. The reason I was asking you, because the last move for me, from my previous employer, I have spent with my previous employer almost 5 years.
Yeah.
And the trigger for me to leave wasn't anything financial, wasn't because of the company or anything, but because I reached the level after 5 years where I felt, okay, I've been adding a lot of value.
Yeah.
And as you add value, you get value because
Yeah.
you're learning along with the way
Yeah.
you try things, they don't work, so you try other things.
Something
So
else.
this
Yeah.
is the learning process.
Yeah.
But if you're not adding any more value, if you have done 99% or 95% of what you're supposed to do, and there isn't any much that you can add, then you start to get a bit rusty
Yeah. You
and
might.
I
Well,
get a
you've got
bit
a choice then.
frustrated.
You're going to move
Yeah,
upwards or onwards. So outwards.
exactly.
They think upwards in the organization, another role. Now that other role, that's the other good thing. You might then want to say, right, I'm the treasury manager in the UK. I want to be the treasury manager in Europe. I want to be the treasury manager in the Middle East. Yes, I'll put my hand up for that, or I'll go across, and it can be the Far East as well. It can be Asia. I've seen that with some of the very successful treasurers we've had on the podcast. I remember Mark many years ago. He's now a very senior role at Johnson Controls. He was in Belgium. And then they came in the office one day and said, oh, we need to recruit someone in Milwaukee. And he said, I'll do it. And he said, right, where's Milwaukee? And they went, it's in America. We went, okay, I'll go. So he went from Belgium across with Johnson Controls. And then 3 years later, someone said, oh, our Asia Pacific guy, he's leaving in Singapore. He went, I'll go. So he literally went there, and then he bounced back again through Europe to the short stint, but then he went straight back to the US. And now he's like gone further and further. He's right at the top. He's on the board and everything else. He's one of the most senior guys because he was willing to put his hand up and go, that's where Treasury can take you around the world. That's one of the sexy things about it. But again, he decided not to move outwards. We have Patrick McCartan, the global treasurer of Caterpillar. He's been with Caterpillar 30 years. And I said, oh, you've done the same job for 30 years. We joked about it on the podcast. He's done a very similar thing, but he went through Latin America. That's where he met his wife as well. I think it was Mexico, whatever. But he's gone all the way around, but he's been with, Cat all the way around the world. And that's the key thing as well. So, Treasury can take you there if you embrace it in that way.
100%, I agree. And so I think what I want to say here is before you decide and before you reach out to Mark and say, you know what, man, I want to move, you need to put your hands on what are the reasons why you move.
Yeah.
Is it because you're no longer adding value and hence not learning anymore? And for me, I think this is the most important thing. You need to keep learning regardless of what position you're at or how old are you. Or is it because it's not fitting your personal life? Maybe it's not fitting your family. Maybe if your company wants to move you to the UK, but you're not ready to move to the UK because you have your kids in schools in Dubai, you have your life is in Dubai, and yeah, it's a good opportunity, but it's for my family. I cannot move. So what I want to say is make sure that you're moving for the right reason. I'm not just moving for the sake of moving, because it creates this extra. Maybe you correct me if I'm wrong. You've been in the recruitment for so long. It creates this excess pool that is not really organic, if I might say.
100%. Well,
right.
Not only that, and I just want. And you're right. And the example I would say is, it shouldn't be a push. It should be a pull. And basically, what that is what I mean by that is, if you are feeling yourself pushed out of your company or pushing yourself on, and that being pushed out and thinking, oh, I want to get out of here, then you're leaving for the wrong reasons per se. If you are finding you want an opportunity overseas, wherever that might be, and it's pulling you towards that direction, then that's the reason to go for it. If you're being pulled in that direction, you think, actually, this is going to be the right thing for me, the right thing for my family, the right thing for my partner, and if I've got kids and stuff. If that's the right thing and you want an experience like that, I had Chan, the global treasurer for PayPal, and actually it was amazing. I got him on the podcast again. We'll give some links to these. Amazing guy. He was on the west coast of the US. Great background, international background growing up as well. He was on the west coast with PayPal, and they said, right, we need someone in Singapore. Yeah, I'll do it. He said, boom. And he went off to Singapore, brilliant with his wife and kids. PayPal supported that move. And then I saw him write an article on LinkedIn, and it was great about how much they supported it. And then he was moving back from Singapore, and he was saying he wanted to thank PayPal publicly about how, and he was going back to be the global treasurer. He's a great guy and everything else. But I wrote to him expecting nothing, thinking, I'll be on the podcast, we can talk about this. And actually, I woke up the next day, had a really nice email that's saying, yeah, I listen to your podcast, Mike, sometimes when I'm walking the dog around Singapore. I'm like, oh, fantastic. Yeah, great. So he was like, yeah, I listened to it. And I was like, I'll be on your podcast. I was like, amazing. But what we talked about with him and his Treasury career is how Treasury can take you there. And it's done that. It's given him this international and going out there. I've got Pradipto Bagchi, who's another great treasurer, Zimmer Biomet. Is going to be my guest in New York in a few months. He talks about there's nothing better than having a meal in India or Italy or in Dubai when he sits down with all the local teams and gets to know them. And he said, sitting down with your Treasury team there, looking them in the face, sharing some food, it's the thing he does. He always goes out for a meal, gets to know them on a personal level. He said, that's what Treasury can take you there. And I just remember that sticking in my mind, one of my favourite podcasts with him, about the relationship and how that sort of blends across. If you're doing it, as I say, and Treasury's pulling you there with the right relationships, you should do it. If you're being pushed out of your company, you're frustrated, you're in the wrong mindset. There's a good idea to move on, but maybe making an international move at the same time, that's not the right thing. Only move if you feel you're being pulled that way, sort of thing. I think that's one of the key things.
100%. You should be moving for the right reasons.
Yeah.
I think
we've got a couple more minutes. Should we? What do you need to say?
No, I think just to wrap it up, I think we established that it is doable to move. You just need to understand at what stage you are in, what are your opportunities to move. If it's within your company, if it's not within your company, so what options do you have? You need to be aware of the cost of living in the country that you're going to, the requirements of the skills and the knowledge that you need if you're going to oversee a different region, because like I mentioned, in the Middle East and Africa, especially in Africa, it's a bit different than if you have been managing all your life Europe and US. Also, I wanted to mention that Egypt recently has become also a hub for a lot of companies where they have their regional offices there or their headquarters there, and they do provide, not all the companies, but a lot of the big companies, they do provide good packages for expats. It has been recently a country where a lot of expats are moving there. So if you're looking to move, maybe this is something you if you're moving with.
Yeah, exactly. And to summarize what you said, I think you got all that little checklist you gave, but the other one I would add is market dynamics. Is think about is there demand for your job over there, and if 100%. There is, then people will be pulling, they will be trying to get you to go from there, and they will provide sponsorship. But we as a recruitment company, we can't help you. Because we don't represent companies and we don't represent candidates where there's sponsorship needed. That's not in our, we're not allowed to. It's against the law, sort of thing. So that's one of the key things.
It's very, honestly, it's very redundant to reach out to a recruiter to help you to move to another country without you understanding all the aspects around it. I mean, you need to understand, why you need to put your shoes in the recruiter's place, right? Put yourself in his shoes, right? How is he going to help you? What kind of skill set that's very unique that you have that is not already available in this market, right? So you need to check list all your options already. Can I move within my company? Can I move on my own and take the risk and take the costs of trying to go there if there is a possible visa that would allow me to that? And then if there is something that you're 100% sure there is an opportunity that only you can fit, which is like very, very doubtful that you find something that only you can fit and it's not within your company and it's another country, that a recruiter would be say, yeah, sure, come on. So me personally, whenever I'm applying for something, if it's outside of the country I'm living in, it's one of two things. Either the recruiter reach out to me himself. That means that the company itself has no problem in the sponsorship.
They want to,
Or the post, the recruiter said that we don't have an issue in sponsoring you. You can apply. Other than that, please don't waste your time and the recruiter's time. I think that.
Exactly. And I think the fact is, Treasury professionals are global, are international. you guys know the market, so do your research. Do your research before you're going somewhere, or before you, as you say, before you even apply. Don't come to us for it. Say, oh, can you help me? Can you, like, hang on? No, do your own research. You can go on the web rather than just asking me, oh, can you wave your magic wand and stuff like that. We're here to help, but there are some blockages. I've said before that I was told years ago by one of my experts, oh, there's a global pipeline. People can move around the world. I went, no, they can move around the world with this company, but you can't actually move externally. And they went, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I was like, yeah, exactly. So, it's very different, but no, amazing.
Yeah, 100%. Great. I really, really enjoyed the discussion with you, Mark. I really, really appreciate it. And thanks for the collab. And I'm looking forward for our next episode.
Hopefully. Yeah, when we next catch up, great stuff. Thank you, sir.